They were the church's golden family, a powerful man of God, his elegant wife, and their bright-eyed little boy. Every Sunday, the congregation would rise to their feet as Pastor Elijah Whitmore took the pulpit, his words moving hearts, his voice stirring souls. By his side stood Devondra, graceful and poised, the embodiment of a Proverbs 31 woman. Their son, Tavius, barely 6, often sat in the front pew, wide-eyed and innocent, watching his father deliver sermons about righteousness, forgiveness, and the power of truth. But behind the pulpit, behind the prayers and the polished family portraits, hid a secret so dark, so unspeakable, it would fracture not only their home, but the very faith of those who once revered them. What seemed like divine favor was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade. And when the truth finally clawed its way into the light, it didn't just destroy reputations. It left blood on the floor and a town gasping for answers. How does a household built on faith and public admiration collapse into blood and betrayal? What happens when the very person we trust to lead us to salvation becomes the architect of our worst nightmare? Before we dive into this horrifying case, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more true stories that reveal the terrifying truths hiding behind closed doors. Elijah Vondell Whitmore was the kind of man whose voice could fill a room even when he whispered. As the senior pastor of Mount Rebirth Baptist Church in rural Alabama, he wasn't just a preacher, he was a force. With a presence that demanded attention and a smile that disarmed skeptics, Elijah had grown his church from a modest flock of 25 to a congregation of nearly 800. His sermons were fiery, laced with scripture, conviction, and a cadence that made people rise from their seats and weep. Men wanted to be him, women prayed for husbands like him, and young boys looked at him the way they did superheroes. His backstory was often part of his testimony. Born to a single mother in a housing project in Mobile, Elijah had once walked the streets, caught between gang life and God. He said it was a gun pressed to his temple at 17 that changed everything. He dropped to his knees and cried out to the Lord, promising if he was spared, he'd never walk that dark path again. The bullet missed, and Elijah became a man on fire for the gospel. He studied theology in Jackson, started preaching out of a rented storefront, and built Mount Rebirth Baptist from the ground up with nothing but faith, charisma, and sheer will. Beside him every step of the way was Devondra Whitmore, his high school sweetheart turned wife. Devondra was the quiet beauty whose presence could still a room without saying a word. While Elijah blazed like a wildfire, Devondra was the calm stream beside him. Reserved, poised, never raising her voice but always commanding respect. She had a background just as humble. The daughter of a seamstress and a janitor, she worked as a bank teller before marrying Elijah and becoming the unofficial queen of Mount Rebirth. She ran the women's ministry with grace, led Sunday school fundraisers, and organized food drives. Her elegant style and polished demeanor became a blueprint for other women in the church. She wore pearls on Wednesdays and head wraps on Thursdays. Always immaculate, always composed. But what no one saw, what no one even dared to suspect, was how little freedom she truly had. Devondra rarely went anywhere without Elijah's permission. She didn't answer her phone after 9 p.m., and when she spoke in public, her eyes often flicked to him first, as if asking for silent approval. Behind closed doors, the ideal wife played her role like it was scripted in stone. Their son, little Tavius, was 6 years old, with deep dimples and a laugh that made people melt. On Sundays, he wore miniature versions of his father's suits, sometimes velvet, sometimes pinstripe, always tailored and always perfect. He sat in the front pew, swinging his legs, mouthing the words of hymns like he had learned them in the womb. He was a church darling, hugged and kissed by the congregation after every service. Sister Mabel gave him peppermints, Deacon Howard slipped him dollar bills, and the choir called him Baby Bishop. Together, the Whitmores were seen as the pinnacle of Christian family life, loving, devoted, unshakable. Church newsletters featured them regularly. Devondra and Elijah were the faces of faith-based marriage seminars, counseling couples with troubled unions, and posing arm in arm in glossy brochures titled God's Covenant in Action. They prayed together. They fasted together. They never showed a crack, not a hint of discord. The town revered them. Outsiders admired them. And inside Mount Rebirth's ornate stained glass sanctuary, under that great golden cross, they stood as living proof that blessings came to those who believed. But no one, not a single soul, knew what was coming. By the time the whispers began, the damage had already taken root. The cracks behind the Whitmore's pristine image were invisible to the naked eye, but they were there, quietly growing, quietly bleeding. Elijah Vondell Whitmore, the beloved pastor with the thunderous voice and velvet suits, was not the man he portrayed to his congregation. In the privacy of their brick home just a few blocks from Mount Rebirth, he ruled his family not as a husband or father, but as a tyrant cloaked in righteousness. He controlled every detail of Devondra's life, what she wore, who she spoke to, when she could leave the house, even how she styled her hair. "Don't draw too much attention," he would murmur with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're a first lady, not a harlot." When she tried to speak up, when she dared to question his word, his voice would darken, his sermons turning personal at the dinner table. He would slam his Bible on the counter, quoting verses with venom. "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as unto the Lord." Devondra learned early on that resistance came at a cost, emotional at best, bruising at worst. Her friends had stopped asking her to brunch. Every invitation was met with a polite decline or no response at all. Calls went unanswered. Texts left unread. At first, they chalked it up to busyness or her devotion to church work. But over time, even the most naive began to sense something wasn't right. Devondra no longer made eye contact during services. She smiled with her lips, never her eyes. And on the rare occasion she did speak, it was measured and hushed, like she was afraid of echoing too loud. Tavius had changed too. Gone was the bubbly little boy who used to run through pews and giggle during potlucks. Now he walked with small, careful steps, his hands always folded, his head slightly bowed. He stopped speaking in full sentences, choosing instead to nod or shake his head. He flinched at loud voices, avoided rough play with other children. Even his teachers at Sunday school noticed how he would color only in gray, how he always looked toward the sanctuary doors as if expecting someone to burst through. At night, Devondra poured herself into a leather-bound journal she kept hidden behind the books on their bedroom shelf. In its pages, she found the only freedom she had left. Her handwriting slanted and rushed, the ink sometimes smudged by tears. She wrote about Elijah's cold silences, the nights he locked her in the guest room without explanation, the insults disguised as scripture. She chronicled the way his eyes went blank during his rages, how his voice became eerily calm when he threatened to make an example out of her if she ever left. One entry simply read, "Sometimes he stares at me like I'm not real. I sleep with one eye open." Devondra's younger sister, Charisse, had always been the one person who could see past the smiles. She had a mouth that didn't know how to stay shut and eyes that saw what others didn't. Over the years, she asked the hard questions. Why you always sound like you're scared to breathe around him? Why Tavius look like he ain't slept in days? When Devondra brushed her off with strained laughter or changed the subject, Charisse pushed harder. Finally, one tear-soaked evening after a particularly brutal phone call, Devondra whispered through the receiver, "I want to go, Charisse. I really do." Her voice cracked. "But he'll find me." Charisse didn't need an explanation. She heard enough in that sentence. She offered her couch, her guest room, even cash. "Pack a bag. I'll come get you tonight." But the next morning, Charisse's texts went unanswered. A picture of the Whitmores appeared on the church's Facebook page instead, Elijah and Devondra holding hands beneath a banner that read "Marriage Built on the Rock." Tavius stood in front of them, eyes dull, smile forced. From the outside, the sanctuary was glowing. Inside, the darkness was swallowing them whole. It was a gray, rain-slicked Thursday when Elijah Vondell Whitmore stood on the steps of Mount Rebirth Baptist Church, face streaked with water, some from the heavens, some from his eyes, and told the world his wife and son were missing. He said Devondra had taken Tavius to the grocery store around 9 a.m. and never came home. His voice cracked. His hands trembled as he clutched a framed photo of them. Devondra with her soft smile, Tavius beaming in his school uniform. "The devil is a liar," Elijah declared to the gathered news crews. "And God will return what was taken." The town responded as expected. Prayer circles formed. Flyers went up in corner stores and bus stops. The church held candlelight vigils 3 nights in a row. Neighbors dropped off food. Congregants took turns canvassing the streets. Elijah gave interviews on the local news, reading scriptures with wet eyes and a weary heart. "We walk by faith, not by sight," he said, voice low and trembling. "My wife and my son will come home." But behind the veil of grief, Cherise felt something was off. She watched the news segments, the weeping pastor, the carefully chosen Bible verses, and her stomach twisted. Elijah's face was somber, his words poetic, but something in his eyes looked dry, empty, controlled, like someone reading a script. She tried calling him, tried offering help, but was told curtly that the church family had it under control. The first real crack came when police found Elijah's SUV parked in a muddy trail lot near Lake Marbury, a secluded body of water 30 minutes outside town, surrounded by woods and rarely visited outside of fishing season. It was towed in around 3 a.m. on the day Devondra and Tavius vanished. Elijah never mentioned it to police. When asked, he claimed he had gone there to pray. Then they found Devondra's car. It was just off a dirt road that circled the southern edge of the lake, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, untouched. Tavius' school bag was crumpled in the back, his name stitched in blue thread on the strap. The sight of it turned one of the detectives pale. "It looked like someone just walked away mid-thought," he later said. The scene didn't scream robbery. It didn't suggest an accident. It whispered something colder, something intentional, something staged. Detectives pulled phone records, examined security cameras, combed through Devondra's social media, and what they found pulled the mask off completely. Her phone had been off since early that morning, but her Google history from the night before showed searches like abuse shelters near me and how to escape safely with a child. Her last text sent to Cherise at 2:04 a.m. was a single word: leaving. Elijah's phone, however, had no such gaps. It pinged at the church, at the gas station, then strangely at the lake. Twice. The storm of questions was growing louder now, even among the faithful. Whispers circled the sanctuary pews, low and cautious at first, then emboldened. "He doesn't seem right. Why didn't he say anything about the lake? Did she really go to the store that morning? Or was that just what he told them?" Police returned to the house with a warrant this time. They searched the master bedroom, the garage, the backyard. What they found in the guest room would make headlines for weeks: a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards containing Devondra's journal. Every page was intact. Every fear, every bruise, every silent scream documented in her careful cursive. The final entry was dated the night before she vanished. It ended with a chilling prayer. "God, if tomorrow is my last day, let Tavius make it out alive. Let someone find the truth. I can't be afraid anymore." Suddenly, the church's golden family didn't look so golden anymore. And Elijah Vondell Whitmore was no longer just a grieving husband and father. He was a man with secrets too heavy to bury, and the earth was beginning to give way. The air was still when officers arrived at the old cabin, a crumbling structure swallowed by trees and time, tucked deep into the backwoods 45 miles outside Bledsoe County. It had once belonged to Elijah's grandfather, a place few even remembered existed. But a neighbor, an older man who used to hunt in those woods, had called in a tip after seeing unfamiliar tire tracks leading to the property days after Devondra and Tavius went missing. The smell hit them first. Thick, sour, unmistakable. A slow death clinging to the walls. The officers pushed through the dust, the mildew, and the silence, their boots echoing on warped wood floors. In the center of the room, beneath an old rug and nailed-down planks, they found the floor had been tampered with, pried open and sealed again. They ripped through the boards. Beneath that, a layer of hastily poured cement. When they broke through it, the truth rose like smoke. Devondra and Tavius lay side by side, their bodies hidden as if buried with care, arms close, feet together, like they'd been gently placed. Tavius still wore his Spider-Man pajamas. Devondra's fingers were laced with her son's. Her eyes, though closed, seemed strained. Not peaceful, not free, just finished. Nearby, hidden behind a broken cabinet, was a plastic bin filled with belongings. Devondra's journal was there, her second one. The final entries were jagged, written in panicked ink. There was also a counseling intake form she had printed out and filled in, but never submitted. The box held a toothbrush, a child's sock, a photo of her and Tavius on a picnic, evidence of a woman trying to start over. Her escape plan, cut short. They pieced together the timeline quickly. Devondra had finally made up her mind to leave. That weekend, she'd told Cherise she was ready, that she had a bag packed, that she was done living in fear. She wanted Tavius to grow up safe, to laugh again, to be a child. She'd waited so long to stop surviving and start living. Elijah had found the packed bag before dawn. When the news broke, the town came undone. Devondra's face, once glowing from church brochures, now stared hollowly from breaking news banners. Tavius' school photo, his gap-toothed smile, his big bright eyes flickered across every screen. The horror spread like fire, consuming the illusion they had all believed for so long. Mount Rebirth Baptist Church was no longer a house of worship. It was a crime scene. Elijah was arrested the following Sunday during the morning service. He sat at the pulpit in his usual crisp gray suit, Bible in hand, delivering what would be his last sermon. The sanctuary was full, shoulder to shoulder, the faithful still clinging to hope. The detectives waited until the benediction. When they walked down the aisle, Elijah didn't flinch. He simply closed his Bible, rested it on his lap, and lifted his hands as if to bless them. He didn't resist, didn't weep, didn't ask why. He leaned toward the lead detective and whispered, calm as ever, "I had to keep my house in order." Gasps rippled through the pews. Cherise, sitting in the back, fell to her knees. A mother screamed. And for the first time in over a decade, Elijah Vondell Whitmore descended from the pulpit, this time, not as a man of God, but as the architect of his own damnation. The headline hit every major network within hours. Respected pastor arrested for murdering wife and son. Photos of Elijah, arms outstretched mid-sermon, face lit with conviction, flashed across the screen alongside mugshots that looked hollow, cold, unrecognizable. Devondra and Tavius became the names on every news anchor's lips. The town of Bledsoe County, once so quiet and devout, was now the epicenter of a national nightmare. Parishioners stood outside Mount Rebirth Baptist Church in shock, some lighting candles, others just staring at the building like it had betrayed them. Tears flowed freely. A few clutched their Bibles. Many refused to believe it. "There has to be some mistake," one elderly deacon insisted to reporters. "Pastor Elijah was a man of God. He baptized my grandchildren." But then the cracks began to widen. Former members of the church stepped forward. One by one, they shared stories. How Elijah would scold women during counseling sessions for bringing sin into their marriages. How he once screamed from the pulpit about the dangers of a woman who forgets her place. Others described his anger, how he was obsessed with respect, control, and submission. "We thought it was just his way," one woman admitted through tears. "Now I wonder what we were really applauding all these years." Social media ignited into chaos. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag justice for Devondra. Hashtag Tavius deserved better. Hashtag behind the pulpit. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Some labeled Elijah a narcissistic abuser, a wolf in shepherd's clothing. Others defended him, calling it a smear campaign, suggesting he'd been provoked or set up. Heated arguments over patriarchy, faith, and spiritual abuse dominated timelines. Everyone had an opinion. Few had peace. Cherise, devastated but burning with purpose, stepped into the storm. Cameras crowded around her as she stood before the courthouse, trembling but unyielding. In her hands, she held a worn notebook and a red plastic toy car. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "This is my sister's journal," she said. "These are her words, not mine." She read entries aloud, descriptions of Elijah's rages, the nights Devondra cried in the bathroom, the fear she felt even in her own bed. Then she held up the toy. "This was Tavius' favorite. He used to race it around my living room when he visited. He wanted to be a race car driver. He was 6 years old." Her voice faltered. "They trusted him, and he destroyed them." The silence that followed her words was thick and painful. No scripture could smooth it. No hymn could soothe it. In that moment, the town was forced to look at the truth in full light. The perfect image was gone, burned away by the firestorm. All that remained were ashes, questions, and the haunting echo of 2 lives stolen by the one man they should have been safest with. Elijah Vondell Whitmore entered the courtroom in shackles, wearing a gray suit instead of a robe, his once commanding presence reduced to a shadow. The sanctuary that had once echoed with his fiery sermons now sat eerily quiet in his absence. And yet, in the courtroom, his silence screamed. He spoke no words, offered no apology, just sat there stoic, unreadable, as if waiting for divine intervention that would never come. The prosecution wasted no time unraveling the image Elijah had spent decades building. They called it a house of mirrors, each one reflecting not righteousness, but control, manipulation, and violence cloaked in Scripture. The journal entries became the heart of the case. Page after page of Devondra's handwriting spilled out a life of isolation and dread. Text Messac, 2 days before the murders, was read aloud in court. "This time I mean it. I'm leaving, Charisse. No more fear." The jury listened, many with wet eyes and clenched jaws. The defense tried to argue stress, pressure, even suggested a possible mental break. But there was no evidence of psychosis, just a pattern of calculated control. The GPS data, the cement, the hidden cabin. It was all too deliberate, too cold. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. 2 lives stolen in one monstrous act. As the judge read the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, Elijah blinked, but didn't flinch. He bowed his head, whether in shame or defiance, no one could say. The town was never the same. Mount Rebirth Baptist Church, once a beacon, stood abandoned within weeks. The doors were locked, the stained glass windows boarded over like wounds no one wanted to see. Eventually, it was sold to a private buyer who promised to turn it into a shelter, though the pews and pulpit were removed entirely. No one wanted a reminder of what had once been preached there. In front of the town library, where children once gathered for story hour and holiday events, a bronze plaque was installed beneath a cherry blossom tree. It read, "In memory of Devondra and Tavius Whitmore. May their light never be dimmed." Townspeople brought flowers. Some knelt in prayer. Others simply stood in silence. Charisse refused to let the story end in grief alone. Months after the sentencing, she launched Devondra's Light, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of spiritual and domestic abuse. She held workshops, partnered with therapists, and visited churches across the state, speaking boldly about the danger of silence and the masks that evil sometimes wears. She often closed her talks with a quote from Devondra's journal. "Even when you're trapped in darkness, there's always a sliver of light. I just need to find mine." Charisse would pause, look at the room, and say, "If you're listening, that light might be you." This story is more than a tragedy, it's a reckoning. A piercing look into how power, when wrapped in holiness, can twist into something monstrous. Elijah Vondell Whitmore was not a stranger in the night, not a masked intruder. He was a beloved pastor, a husband, a father. He prayed over people's children while crushing the spirit of his own wife behind closed doors. Devondra smiled through church bulletins and charity dinners, all while silently begging to be seen. Tavius, bright and full of wonder, never had a chance to grow beyond the walls of his father's suffocating control. Their story is not just about murder. It's about the blind spots we defend in the name of devotion, the questions we never ask because we're too afraid of the answers, the sermons we praise without looking at the life behind the pulpit. Devondra's journal was her scream, one she believed no one would ever hear. But we heard it. We must carry it. What do we excuse in the name of love? What do we silence because the truth makes us uncomfortable? When charisma replaces character, who pays the price? If Devondra and Tavius had been truly seen, truly heard, would they still be here? Let their story sit with you. If this story shook you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth explorations into the darkest corners of love, control, and betrayal. And always, always listen to the silences. They often scream the loudest.